What is up, guys? Matt here, coming at you with another quick video. Got something pretty exciting today. I just wanted to show you guys this neat little system we got going on here. So let's check this out. What? So this system is something that's been available for the FCX24 for a pretty good while, like at least a year or two. And it's kind of a dig unit, really more of like a rear disconnect, I would call it, because it doesn't actually lock up the rear. It would probably work better on the FCX24. I never got one for it just because I kind of did the dig thing with dual motors, and like I said, this is really like a rear disconnect because it just disconnects the rear drive shaft basically. Now on the FCX24 you have the worm gear, so you're going to get some lockup back there. So it would probably act a little more like dig, but on the FCX, these are pretty free rolling. So you can see it's gonna let that rear end kind of roll. It does have a little drag, but basically all this system does, as you can see here, when I click this in, that slides up and catches on the drive shaft. Let me see if I can get it turned. Catches right there. So this was made with 3D printed parts, and that's another reason I hadn't really got one, because this 3D printed stuff does not last too well a lot of times. So this is the slip shaft that it comes with, and you can see I broke it just trying to install it. So normally this went here coming out of the transmission, and it just allowed this to slide up and down on it. Of course, I broke it, like always. So I just took one and modified it. Took one similar like this, and I cut some notches here for that piece to slide into. So when I pull this back, you can kind of see that notch that's cut in there. See how that slides right in there? So that's what catches the drive shaft and lets it pull with all four wheels. Now if you pop it back like that, it disconnects it basically, so it's not grabbing at all and it's not pulling the rear. So pretty cool system. What is with the flies? Oh my gosh. All right, so we're gonna try this thing out a little bit. I just want to show you guys how you can make it work on the FCX. And we still have the 2 speeds. So the way I set this up is I put it on this channel 4 switch. So here I'm running 4-wheel. I click it down and it disengages that rear. And then I still have my 2-speed here. So we have our low and high still. It's just on the channel 3 switch down here. So we got a lot going on. That's why I didn't put this on one of my 4-wheel steer rigs. Now, I want to talk about a little bit how this works, because you kind of have to limit your rear travel with this setup. And I have these shocks kind of in like a forced droop setup. They do have oil in them. These are just stock FCX24 shocks. They do have oil in them, but then I also have a spring in there that's pulling them down. And I did that on the rear because with this being made for the FCX24, and honestly, I feel like on the FCX24, you couldn't have a major amount of travel because it would do the same thing. So hopefully you can see this little horseshoe shaped looking piece has to catch that drive shaft to work. So if you're getting like crazy flex and that is not touching in there, which you can't really see, if that's not wrapped around the drive shaft, see that? If that doesn't catch, then it's not gonna work. So you can't have like, you can't be like super flexed out and that not be touching. Now you could probably do like a little bit longer arm there, but then when you're compressed, you're not gonna be able to compress all the way. So it's kind of like you gotta get it perfect really. It's a lot of work to try to get that dialed in and where it needed to be so that when this goes up and down, it does catch. on these grooves or notches that are in this drive shaft piece that comes with the kit. So this comes with it, and this and everything. But you can see that has to catch in those notches. So that has to be able to go up and down every which way, but still come back in the same spot and catch there. So you gotta have your endpoints set pretty well. It takes a decent amount of work to make it fit. And then it actually comes with a bracket for mounting to the FCX24. Obviously, I didn't use it for the FCX. It fits in between the rails and everything on the FCX24. Looks like it would be a pretty easy fit on the FCX24. All I did was epoxy this servo onto the chassis for the FCX. So if this servo dies, I'll be doing some work to get that off. But honestly, I have these things laying everywhere now, the stock chassis, so not a big deal. But it's an AGF RC. Pretty stout little servo for the price. I'll link it in the description. It's a great replacement for cheap. I think I got 2 of these for like 20 bucks or something. And it's just one of their little lesser servos, but it's great for like transmission, this obviously, and you could definitely get away with it. As a steering servo, it's not gonna be great, but it's an improvement over a stock FCX24 servo. The FCX servo is really good, period. So unless you strip out your servo horn on that, run that dude because it's stout. So let's go run this, see if it benefits us at all. Because like I said, you're not locking the rear. So if you notice, it still lets the rear spin. It's not actually pulling with the rear, but it lets it rotate because there's no drag back here. There's nothing holding that back. So it's not like we're gonna be able to turn on a dime, but it should improve steering radius. And I mean, not steering radius. It should improve our, the distance it takes to turn, our turning radius. We should be able to get a little tighter turning radius just because we are kind of pulling the rear, but it's not fully locking. So let's go test that out. And then we will run this a little bit and see if it really benefits us at all. But I just thought it was something pretty cool I've been playing with, rigged it up on this setup with the $6 motor. I'm gonna have to put this body back on. Hopefully I got this lined out. I can move it back a little bit to where we are lined up a little better. But I left it off because I want to show you guys the setup in here basically. This arm, I could trim that off, but I just left it. It's not gonna matter. And that's pretty much it. Pretty simple fit. There is a really good, it's Dirty Customs who made this, and he's been making these for, like I said, a year or so. And he has a really good install video for the SCX24. So if you decide to get one, just check out his video. I'll link it in the description because it's super detailed on how to do it. Works great. You will need some epoxy and a few pieces, but he lists everything that you need, all that. So if making this fit the FCX24, you're just gonna have to wing it. And that's all there is to it. But let's check it out. Okay, let's see what kind of turning radius we have with all 4 wheels pulling. All right, so we'll mark the outside of the tire here. All right, so now we'll start in the same position with the rear disengaged. See if it helps us any. Wow, yeah. So we just cut like the whole width of the truck. So basically our distance is from here to here, an improvement. It's quite a bit, even on this slick floor where you know that was not grabbing at all. The rear was still kind of rolling, but it still helped turning radius that much. So this is still gonna help. You can see the rear still kind of catches and drags every now and then, especially if you kind of go slow with it. See that? So it's still gonna work something similar to a dig, just not full on dig unit. So I tried to use this function several times on the indoor course and really just didn't find anywhere that it benefited me that much. I know there will be instances where it could be handy and possibly help a little bit, especially just trying to make some tight turns. But for climbing, it's not going to do much. These things, I mean, and even on 10th scale, if you're trying to climb a hill and you turn dig on, like rarely ever does your front actually drag you up something. You know, it's just too much weight for the front to do alone. Now, there are some certain spots where you'll catch a V-gap or something that you can use the dig, or in this case, rear disconnect. You know, I keep calling it dig, and somebody just say, that's not dig. But to kind of keep the rear from spinning and looping you out and kind of drag the front end in, and then once you get the front to catch enough to where you can pull with all four without the rears looping you out, then it would probably work. So there are cases where it will work, but I just don't see it being all that useful, especially for the trouble that it takes to connect this and the amount that you have to limit your rear travel. I just don't see it paying off, to be honest. So you'll see right here, I try to just get that front end to catch and drag over a little bit without moving the rear, trying to hold the rear where it's at, but pull that front end over. And just any sort of incline really with these, it's just not going to work too well. Now, a super high grip situation, maybe it would work. This is pretty high grip stuff right here, and it just doesn't work all that well with these small trucks. In my opinion, a good four-wheel steer setup is much better. So again, on this rock right here, as soon as I catch right there, I'll try to just kind of pull that front over a little bit. And it honestly causes me to lose ground, you can see there, and really just kind of messed me up completely. So I just don't see it being something that I will use a lot. All right, guys, so after running this, I gotta say it's really just not that useful on these 24s. And that's kind of the way I felt with dig a long time ago on my FCX24. It was so cool when I first did it. I thought, man, this is gonna be great. But I found myself rarely ever using it. You know, it would help with a couple climbs. I wish I still had my old course, because a couple of spots you could use the front to kind of suck the truck in, and then, you know, make the climb. Whereas if you're spinning with the rear as well, you just kind of loop out. So certain situations, it would be helpful to kind of disengage that rear and just use the front to get you where you want to be. V-gaps is where it works a lot of times really well, because you're able to, like I said, that front will pull without the rear spinning and looping you out. The front will kind of, even if you're in a pretty steep incline, that front will kind of pull up and hang on something. Then you can engage all four and climb it. But I didn't really have anywhere to show that off too well on the indoor course here, and it's been raining like crazy, so I can't really get outside right now. But to me, I've found on these, I would much rather have four-wheel steer, honestly. And it's easier to achieve. So really, it's much better, in my opinion. You know, I had to really limit my rear travel, like I said, with this rig to make this system work, and for what I lost in travel and the work and everything that it requires, it's just not worth it to me. Now this thing really needs some high clearance links. These fronts are hanging horrible. You can see where they're dragging everywhere. So I'm definitely gonna make some links for that, get rid of these stock ones. And these rears, honestly, they're dragging everything as well. These are the McHugh links running the way they're supposed to be ran. I normally flip them to get a little more high clearance, and they seem to work better that way to me. I know I don't notice myself hanging them near as bad, so maybe that would help. But this thing is dragging everywhere. Look at that skid. That's why I did this. Yes, much flatter skid. But for me, four-wheel steer, really the way to go. You know, you can achieve the four-wheel steer a lot easier as well. This, you know, the kit is like 20, 25 bucks, but then you got to have a servo, and really you've got to have a different transmitter to set all that up to be able to run your 2-speed and the dig or disconnect. So for the amount of money it's going to cost you to do this and the time and work figuring it out, it's just not that useful. It will have its instances, I'm sure, where it will be very useful, but to me, the main benefit is just not as good as four-wheel steer, and it's much harder to achieve, honestly. So you guys let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell. A lot of stuff coming up. I appreciate everybody. Peace.